Greetings to all of my fellow natural persons out there. Today, we're here in a bipartisan spirit or a nonpartisan spirit, so I wanted to begin by invoking our last great Republican president, Abraham Lincoln, who spoke of government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And the Supreme Court has now threatened to create government of the corporations, by the corporations, and for the corporations. Last year, we composed a letter to Congress demanding a constitutional amendment that they would send out to the states for ratification, reversing the Citizens United decision. And now we have a majority of the members of the Maryland House and the Maryland Senate who have signed on to that letter, which you see before you. And we're going to be releasing that today to the members of Congress. We've just been joined by one of those members of Congress, Congressman John Sarbanes, who is a major leader for campaign finance reform in the U.S. House of Representatives. So why don't we go to him first, and then we'll hear from other colleagues in the Maryland House and Senate. So Congressman John Sarbanes.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you, Jamin Raskin, for organizing this and for his efforts, and all of the senators and delegates that have been part of this effort here in Annapolis. It's actually making a huge difference what's going on across the country at the state level, because every day when members of Congress come to work, we are greeted with more petitions and other expressions of this deep frustration that people, and anger that people are feeling across the country. When they look at their government, they feel like it's been taken away from them, that special interests and big money are sort of running the show, whether it's in Washington or it's in state capitals across the country. And people are starting to push back, and they're doing it on three fronts. They're doing it with a cry for citizen-owned, grassroots-funded campaigns, which is sort of, how do we change the way our campaigns fundamentally are underwritten? Right now, there's a heavy dependency. If you look at where the money comes from, there's a heavy dependency in Congress and in state legislatures in many ways on big money to underwrite campaigns. And the result is that when it comes time to cast votes, when you're in the mode of governing, the institution of Congress or a legislature might lean in the direction of the big money and the special interests and away from the public interest. And the only way that you can cure that is if you change this dependency. So in the words of James Madison, the dependency is on the people alone. And you do that by figuring out how grassroots funded campaigns matched with public dollars can actually step in and substitute for that dependency that's been created on big money and political action committees and so forth. So that's an important piece of this. The second important piece of this effort to push back against big money in politics is disclosure and transparency. Chris Van Hollen is a leader in that area. Where's the money coming from? I call these super PACs sometimes money drones. You're a candidate, you're walking down the street, you hear a buzzing behind you, and next thing you know, $500,000 been dropped on your head. And here's the thing, you don't know who's operating that drone because there's no disclosure, there's no transparency, you don't know where the money's coming from. So we've got to put rules in place that create that kind of disclosure and information that's available to the public. And we can do that legislatively through efforts like the Disclose Act that Chris has been a leader on, but also regulatorily and administratively. The SEC is embarked now, we hope, on a rulemaking, right? A rulemaking that would require publicly traded companies to disclose when they're making political contributions, because that's stuff that investors and shareholders have a right to know. The IRS is in a position to crack down on some of the behavior of these 501c4 social welfare organizations, so-called, but oftentimes they're political operations, like Karl Rove's, that are masquerading as a 501c4, and their political activity far exceeds the boundaries of what's permitted. So we can push for more disclosure. So that's the second piece. The third piece is what you're here advocating about, and that is, let's repeal the Citizens United case, which puts forward this absurd proposition, and nobody articulates this better than Jamie Raskin does, this absurd proposition that corporations our people. This effort across the country, I think, is gaining real traction, much more traction, frankly, than most of the constitutional amendment efforts that we've seen in the recent past. And it's hard to get this thing. It's hard to amend the Constitution. You need 2/3 of a vote in the House of Representatives and 2/3 in the Senate, and then you take it out to the legislatures. But the legislatures are telling us in Washington, you do your job on this issue, and we stand ready to do our piece of what needs to be done to put a constitutional amendment in place to say that the Congress can regulate expenditures and contributions in campaign finance and do so on behalf of the people. So you're doing your job by sending a message to Congress. Now, 2/3 is hard to get. That's 67%. But if Congress and the Senate were representing the will of the people, it wouldn't be hard to get, because when you do the polling and the surveying and you ask people, do you think we ought to overturn the Citizens United case, what comes back are percentages way over 67%. So if we can accurately reflect in Congress the will of the people on this issue, you can get a constitutional amendment that will deal with this problem. So I want to thank you for this incredible effort. Keep working. This is a tremendous coalition. You have wonderful leadership with people like Jamie Raskin. I see Karen Montgomery here to my left, and there's so many others that have been involved, John Card and Jim Rosapap and others I'm not seeing right now. But working together here at the state level and building this coalition across the country, we can push back on big money in politics and make a difference for the people. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Congressman John Sarbanes.